Good afternoon and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to everyone. May I first introduce the Secretary General of World Marketing Council, Sajid. Could you please get up? Let's put up our hands together for him. Well, I am here primarily because I couldn't say no to Hermawan. He's one person who has given so much to the marketing fraternity that our sort of coming in is a very small sort of drop in the ocean. So thank you, Hermawan, for inviting us up here. Just think of it. We just listened to a song by a human being. If AI wants to sing in this particular manner, they have to learn from her. And this is what I will try to focus on, that what the role of leadership is going to be. That will be my primary focus. The other thing, I was thinking in terms of what to place up here. The leaders, probably, stature will change. They will not look the same suited and booted, but they will remain human. And this is something all of us must understand. Leaders will not be replaced, cannot be replaced, and I'll try to place this particular case in front of you and just remind all of us. I'll also start off with a small sort of a background of why I thought that I should speak on this topic rather than anything else. I'm a teacher, primarily a professor, an academic, and every single day we come across students, youth, the Gen Zs, Alphas, and so on and so forth. And I was visiting one of these institutes a couple of months back, and I found that the presence of students in this particular institute had dropped by 80%. 80%, 80. So I wanted to talk to the students and find out why they were not interested in coming up and learning physically. Their answer was very simple. If I can learn online, and if I can ask questions online, and I can ask critical questions online and get all the answers, why should I waste my time coming and listen to the same lecture which was given by my professor a year ago? So we can quite clearly understand the fault lies with us humans in not understanding as to what is happening. A couple of minutes back, we were listening to what AI may even endanger. We were listening to cars which are going to be run by AIs. Do they have cybersecurity within that particular car? If that is also being hacked, this is another question that I would like to raise and keep everyone thinking in terms of what is going to be the role. So let me go forward. Now, us who are academics and we are dealing with or delving in the area of AI in particular, these are the three words or what I call the three dimensions of AI, which we are trying to focus on. So the question is AI, when you talk in terms of AI, is it artificial? Is it apparent? Or is it actually augmented? And I've been delving into it for quite a long time. Can it really be artificial? Is there anything called artificial? Can it learn on its own, artificial learning on its own? Can that happen? The answer is again a big no. Is it apparent? Of course it is apparent. It is out there. It's facing you. It's absolutely talking to us. It's giving us solutions. So it is apparent. You cannot ignore it. The question of ignorance does not arise. So we, back home and in our part of the world, we are actually looking into it more as an augmented function. It is not artificial. It is definitely up there and facing you, it is apparent, but it is also augmented, without which, so the question is, how do we use it? That is the biggest question that we need to answer. So, think of it. AI is actually a no-brainer. No-brainer in terms of what? I mean, we've been discussing in terms of how important it is, how dangerous it is. But it is a no-brainer, obviously, philosophically and cognitively. AI is precisely a no-brainer. Why? Since it lacks human cognition, consciousness, emotion, and creativity. So in real terms, in physiological terms, it is definitely a no-brainer. And if it is no-brainer, then where does the brain come from? Do we have an alternative but you guys? We don't. So this is the first and foremost thing. And you were coming up and saying, do not underestimate yourself. That is such an important question. A very important statement, which all of us must remind ourselves. AI is a no-brainer on another perspective as well. As a technology, why? It is an obvious business tool. Do not ignore it, please. It is too obvious, with substantive strategic and a no-brainer in terms of embedded unique positioning as well. It is a no-brainer. So let's not think in terms of whether we should be using it or misusing it for that matter. But remember that this is important for all of us to accept that we have to take it forward. So, first thing, AI is a no-brainer from two different perspectives, not just from one perspective, that is technology. Two dimensions to it that we need to consider. Now, this is the no-brainer model which we've been delving into for quite some time now. And this basically implies the augmented dimension of it, that it is an augmentation. Why? Because if you really look into it, and if you want to do intention mapping today, in today's world, in 1 second, the only thing that can do or serve that particular purpose is the AI. So the first step, not the last step, is a task that is performed by AI itself, based on data accumulation. Remember the point that you were making, that data accumulation, you were calling it data, digital sort of dimension of it. So now here we're just revisiting that particular part of it, that without data, you cannot do anything. But at the same time, we have to remind ourselves of the fact that only 10 to 15% of the data is valid. Rest of it is not valid. Not valid in terms of what? Not valid in terms of when we ask a question and we want to look into the application of it in real terms. And of course, then we move on to capabilities, searching and mapping, and then re-engineering. All of these dimensions remain with AI and not being tagged to the human. But thereafter, as you look into the changing part of it, now this is where the marketing comes into picture. Remember the differentiation or die, the basic code of our marketing? If the right questions are asked to AI time and again, the likelihood is very high that you will get a bunch of answers in different terms or words, but meaning the same thing. So the change has to be brought in by individuals who are distinctly different from one another. Have a look. Look around ourselves. Which two individuals is same? Not one. That is where the differentiation will come from. From us, from our inner self. That is where it will come from. And that is what we must focus on. And final but not the leader's brain is rejuvenated by this particular thing, nothing more. So AI primarily rejuvenates the leader's brain, and that is the reason why the leader has to look differently, has to think differently, has to work differently. But that does not mean it'll give its seat off to AI, which we are listening time and again. We think that that is exactly what is happening. Now, this is the other dimension that I would like to focus on. And all of us probably are aware of the elephant rider homeostasis story. A rider on the elephant who controls. Does the rider control or the elephant control? What if the elephant becomes emotional? Can the rider control? A question, again, we need to ask ourselves. Right now we are talking about data, and the way AI is working has actually become an elephant. Here it is just the reverse. We were expecting AI to work rationally, which it is not going to do. Why? Because at the backdrop, there are instances which are actually manipulating all of these data, and therefore the elephant in the room is the AI, which is going to manipulate in a way which goes beyond control. And this is exactly where the human intervention also comes into picture. So we are saying quite clearly, intuition comes as immediate reaction to a state. So when suddenly something happens, you are asking a question to AI, it will give you an answer without even thinking, only based on data accumulation that it has on him. And we are believing it. This is intuition, and intuition is not necessarily always right. But there is one danger to it. Once you start following the intuition, how much difficult does it become? Extremely, extremely difficult. When a leader makes a decision on the basis of only data, which is again created by AI, and then you come up and say change, it becomes difficult. This is the dangerous part of AI that we actually forget. We call it human value. There's a human system, but it is something which is dangerous. So therefore, the logical reasoning comes later and may become a defensive strategy impacting the internal ability. And this is where the leader's logical role needs to come in. The experience of a leader needs to come in. This is where the human perspective is much more important. So it's a reverse. As far as I'm concerned, it's the reverse. We thought that logic was given by AI. For me, no, it's just the reverse. It has to be given by the leader. So this is basically what I feel becomes the model. And what does the model look like? Elephant, run by instinct and emotion. They are individualistic in character. The data, AI is individualistic in character, not group. Human society is not just individualistic. It is for the society at large. We work for group. Leaders don't work for individuals. And this is exactly where the role of the leader comes into play. Looking at the larger picture. And of course, the third dimension, AI as a common sense. Common sense reasoning by AI reflects what? Systems' ability to make logical decisions based on available everyday data. We forget everyday real-time data. And and I must add, again, going back to what you were saying, majority of the protected data we don't even access. We cannot access. And there are laws now coming out. All research materials that we come up with, those are valid, are protected. Those are unprotected, are mostly invalid. And we are looking on that particular system. We are making a common sense out of invalid data. And therefore, when we move into the dimension of human beings, the instant reasoning to circumstances based on common sense is lacking at the level of AI. When we make a decision, we think in terms of who are our people. As a leader, that is where experience, that is where empathy, that is where the human element comes into picture. This is exactly what common sense is. Common sense is the most uncommon senses of all type, and which uncommon sense can only bring in within individuals who are different. Otherwise, it would not have come up. So this is basically the model of common sense under AI, where you can quite clearly see that what we are proposing is we have data science up here. Again, the three dimensions that the professor talked about. And then you have the differences in knowledge, differences in rationality, and dimensions of validity, which you are talking about, is what we call knowledge science. And finally, when we talk in terms of decision science, human well-being related to real-time learning. Here, the role of common sense becomes very, very important in terms of reasoning, not analyzing, but reasoning. The reasoning part at times is absent at the AI level. So, AI dynamics for management model looks something like this. We have, of course, our systems design, data management, algorithm analytics, and manage operations. However, there are three roles. One is the AI role, the agent algorithm, and of course, the human. So these two are the human dimension. Which one? Manage operations and of course, strategic decisions. This will remain with the humans. AI is going to come up a role up here in terms of system design. But up here again, we need to work on the algorithm. Why the algorithm is important? Because we are talking about which methodology you are using, which source are you using. All of those things become important. You change the source, your meaning becomes important. The purpose dimension that was being addressed. If your purpose is changed, your algorithm changes, your decision making will change. So one has to be very, very careful in terms of which processes are we using. And this is how the AI human leadership paradigm looks like. We have these, and we have all three roles. For every single area, we'll have the role. The importance will change, but for every single area, there'll be a role. I've just given an explanation of every single one. For example, for the strategic vision and decision making, what do we have? We have AI's role. For example, assess by scanning large amount of data. This will be the role of AI. What will be the role of AI agent algorithm? Agent algorithm will have analysis of the data and stuff like that. And of course, the human strength set the course for the organization in terms of vision, mission, and stuff like that. Remember, all are tagged. You just don't use anything and everything just for the pay. Even for two organizations in the same business, if your vision is not the same, imagine your analytics changes. Because your choice changes. Your question changes. So as a leader, we need to understand that we don't have to just follow a typical whatever data there is up there. We need to ask the right question based on the vision of my organization, my ethos, my customers, my people. Those are the dimensions that are at times missing. Similarly, for emotional intelligence and communications too, the role for the three is going to be entirely different. And this distinction needs to be made. For the human part, AI can't replicate human capability in terms of emotional intelligence. It cannot. It does not have the ability. Why? Because we are changing real time as a human being. When we see a particular data, we rethink. This rethinking process of ours is not the same in the entire room. For example, this entire thing is perceived by every single individual differently. At this particular point in time, AI does not have the data, is not available on the net. And therefore, we do not know, they do not have the answer. We have to understand this basic principle. And similarly, for adaptability and innovation, now innovation for marketing becomes extremely important. We know that the distinct difference between invention and innovation, all of us are aware of. Inventions are static. Innovations are not. Innovations are built on the basis of the problem. Imagine every single day, though we have all the data available, we face different problem every single second the new problems are creeping in. That is where the innovation perspective will come in, asking the right question to the AI to give us a solution. That is what is missing there. And finally, which many of us had discussed in the entire day, the ethical dimension. Along with, of course, leadership, ethical leadership, and of course, bottom line is what? Ensuring the well-being. Well-being of every single stakeholder. So this is basically how I look into it. AI, agent, human, but for well-being, nothing else. And if you can ensure well-being, your perspective will be different. I again remind ourselves, well-being for every single individual is different, for family is different. Please bear in mind, we do not work for individuals, we work for groups. As a leader, we do not work for ourselves, we work for groups. When we work for groups, we have to bear in mind every single group will have its own unique problem. And that is what we need to address. So, AI to innovate, looking at every single organization separately and looking at our target market separately. These two together result in perfect use of AI, not perfect AI. There is no such thing called perfect AI. Perfect AI can only come in if the entrepreneur and the target market, the innovation that he's talking about or thinking of, is designed perfectly. I'll end here. Thank you so much.